Ban walked through the corridors of her mansion, heels clicking on polished marble floors. Each step echoed the sound of her achievements, the wealth she had amassed, the reputation she had built, the life she had crafted from ambition and endless work. But as she wandered from room to room, taking in the chandeliers, the fine art on the walls, and the sparkling decor, she felt a hollow ache she didn't want to acknowledge. To outsiders, Ban seemed like the epitome of success. She had married Charles, a wealthy businessman with a prestigious reputation. Their union only elevated her status, cementing her place in the city's elite circles. Together, they had 2 children, Toby and Kara, who attended the best schools and wore designer clothes. Ban herself was admired by many. She was the woman who had it all. Yet there was one piece missing from this picture of perfection. Ban had left behind the woman who had raised her, her mother, a quiet, loving woman who had always put Ban first. It had been years since they'd spoken, and Ban hardly thought of her mother anymore. Whenever a pang of guilt stirred within her, she brushed it aside, focusing instead on her beautiful home, her luxurious lifestyle, her carefully curated friendships. Passing by an old family photo tucked away on a shelf, Ban paused briefly. Her mother's gentle smile looked back at her from the frame. Ban's lips tightened as she quickly looked away, telling herself that the life she had now was all she needed. There was no room for the past. The days flowed into each other as Ban continued to cultivate her image of perfection. But a growing tension brewed in her household, an invisible wall she could feel with each passing day. Her husband, Charles, had become more distant, his once adoring gaze now replaced with cold, judgmental stares. Ban pretended not to notice, dismissing it as stress from his work, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. One evening, during dinner, Charles set down his fork, breaking the silence. "People talk about your choices, Ban. They say you abandoned the one person who was always there for you." Ban froze, her hand hovering over her plate. She looked at Charles, trying to mask the flash of pain his words brought. But the tone in his voice was unmistakable. There was a mixture of disappointment and contempt she couldn't ignore. She dropped her gaze, hiding her emotions under a practiced smile. Charles's words stirred something within her, something she had buried long ago. Memories of her mother surfaced, unbidden and unwanted. The warmth of her mother's hands, the sound of her laugh, the sacrifices she had made for Ban. Her chest tightened, but she quickly suppressed the feeling, reminding herself that she had left her mother behind for a reason. Her mother's modesty, her simple ways. She didn't belong in this world Ban had built for herself. Her children, Toby and Kara, seemed to sense the tension between their parents. They, too, had become distant, often avoiding Ban or leaving the room when she entered. They looked at her with eyes that seemed to hold judgment, a reflection of Charles's coldness. Ban couldn't understand it. She had provided them with the best of everything, yet they seemed to pull away from her. It struck her then, her children had never met their grandmother. She had never once introduced them to the woman who had raised her with love and sacrifice. A flicker of guilt surfaced, but she shoved it aside, clinging to her pride. But her mother's memory continued to haunt her. She recalled a particular day when her mother had come to visit, bringing with her simple gifts, a handmade scarf, a batch of her favorite homemade sweets. Ban's friends had been there, and she remembered feeling a sharp pang of embarrassment as she saw her mother's modest clothes and calloused hands. She had dismissed her mother with a cold smile, pretending not to know her well, pretending she was someone else. The shame and regret gnawed at her now, like an itch she couldn't scratch. But Ban forced herself to remain composed, focusing on the life she had built, the life she had chosen over her past. One fateful night, Ban was jolted awake by the acrid smell of smoke. Disoriented, she sat up, her mind struggling to grasp what was happening. Then she heard it, a crackling sound, growing louder. The scent of smoke thickened, filling her lungs. Panic gripped her heart as she realized her mansion was on fire. Her first thought was her children. Toby and Kara were asleep in their rooms down the hall, oblivious to the danger. Without a second thought, Ban leapt from her bed and sprinted down the corridor, her heart pounding with fear. Flames licked at the walls, casting an eerie orange glow that illuminated the panic in her eyes. As she battled through the smoke, an irrational thought flickered in her mind. Was this karma? Was this punishment for abandoning her mother? For choosing luxury over family? The thought vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a desperate determination to save her children. Ban broke into Toby's room first, scooping him up in her arms despite the blistering heat that burned her skin. She shielded him with her body as she made her way down the hall, her vision clouded by smoke. Every breath felt like a battle, but she pushed forward, driven by the primal instinct to protect her child. When she reached Kara's room, she heard her mother's voice in her mind, soft yet piercing. "I would have done anything for you, Ban." The words echoed in her head as she grabbed Kara, the weight of the memory nearly overwhelming her. Stumbling through the flames, Ban made it to the front door, collapsing onto the grass with her children in her arms. Her neighbors rushed over, calling for help as they wrapped blankets around her charred body. Ban's vision faded, and the last thing she saw was the burning mansion she had once called home. When Ban awoke, she was lying in a hospital bed, her body wrapped in bandages. The pain was excruciating, a constant reminder of the night that had nearly taken everything from her. She reached up, touching the rough surface of her face, only to realize it was scarred, disfigured beyond recognition. For the first time, Ban felt utterly vulnerable, her appearance a stark contrast to the image of perfection she had always cultivated. When she caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror, a chill ran down her spine. She looked just like her mother. Days turned into weeks as Ban recovered, but the scars were more than physical. Her children visited her reluctantly, their faces pale with fear whenever they saw her. They avoided her touch, recoiling from the mother who had once been the center of their lives. Ban overheard them whispering one day, "I don't want to bring friends here. Mom looks scary." Her heart shattered at their words. She had risked her life for them, yet they looked at her with fear and disgust. Alone in her hospital bed, Ban began to confront the choices she had made. She thought of her mother's love, the sacrifices she had dismissed so easily. She realized, with a painful clarity, that her mother had never once complained, never once asked for anything in return. One afternoon, an elderly woman appeared at her bedside, claiming to be an old friend of her mother. She sat down, her gaze filled with empathy. "Your mother was a good woman," she said gently. "She loved you very much, Ban." Ban's eyes filled with tears as the woman shared stories of her mother's quiet strength, her unwavering hope. "Your mother waited by the window every day," the woman continued. "She hoped, even in her final days, that you would come back." The weight of the words crushed Ban's heart. She had abandoned the one person who had loved her unconditionally, choosing wealth and status over family. When Ban was discharged, she knew what she had to do. She would return to her mother's home, seek forgiveness, and make amends. As she walked through her mother's neighborhood, memories of her childhood surfaced. Her mother's comforting embrace, her gentle voice, her selfless sacrifices. She reached the old house, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She called out, "Mama, it's me, Ban. I'm here." But the silence was deafening. A neighbor approached her, his expression filled with sorrow. "Your mother passed away last year," he said softly. "She waited for you every day, Ban. She spoke of you often, always saying you'd come back." Ban's legs gave way as she sank to the ground, her heart breaking under the weight of regret. Her mother had died alone, clinging to the hope that her daughter would return. Ban had robbed her of that hope, leaving her to face her final days alone. Tears streamed down Ban's face as she looked up at the sky, her vision blurred. She thought she saw her mother's face in the clouds, a silent reminder of the love she had discarded. The realization struck her like a blow. She had spent her life chasing after status, only to lose the one person who had truly loved her. Sitting alone in her mother's empty home, Ban allowed herself to feel the full weight of her choices. She had traded family for wealth, love for luxury, only to find herself empty and alone. Her mother's love had been a gift, one she had squandered in pursuit of a life that now felt meaningless. As she sat there, Ban whispered to the empty room, "I'm sorry, Mama. I should have been there." Her voice was swallowed by the silence, a silence that echoed the void in her heart. She had lost the chance to make amends, and the regret would haunt her forever. To the viewers, Ban says, if you enjoyed this story, remember that family is priceless. Cherish those who love you before it's too late. She takes a deep breath, adding, "Click on the next story to explore more about the choices we make. Like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories."